So one of the more powerful tools in Excel that is typically misunderstood is the array function. And the reason it's so misunderstood and so mysterious is that it operates in a way that's different from any other cell formula or function in Excel. So because of that, they can be very tough to learn and very tough to master. But once you do get a grasp of how array functions actually work, they can be an incredibly powerful tool. And I'm going to show you an example of how they can also be used in the context of building data visualizations in Excel. So on the array percentage grid tab, we've got a user-defined value in B2 where you can just type in any particular percentage, and then we have 4 columns with array functions in columns G through J. Now rather than writing these out from scratch and really not doing them justice, I figured I'd put them in here now so that you can dig in as much or as little as you choose to kind of decode what these functions are actually doing. But in the interest of time and keeping it data visualization focused, I'll just give you a quick summary of what these 4 are actually trying to accomplish here. So the array function in column G essentially just uses mod and row functions to define an array 100 rows tall that looks something like this. Basically, it just counts from 0 to 9 and then repeats the process from 0 again. The second array function in column H uses integer and row formulas to produce the array that we see here, which is basically counting groups of 10. So there are 10 zeros, 10 ones, 10 twos, all the way down to 10 nines. And when we scroll back up, basically what these formulas in columns G and H are doing is they're creating pairs of points that can be used to populate a 10 by 10 grid using the scatter plot chart type. And what you end up with is 100 individual points. And so these 2 columns are essentially just creating a template, that's why we're calling them empty boxes, that we can use to visualize whatever percentage is written in B2. And then the second 2 array functions, basically all they're doing is they're using this percentage to replicate the values in columns G and H down to a particular row. So in this case, I've written 15%. So you'll notice that the first 15 rows are just duplicates of G and H, and then they're zeroed out after that. You can see if I change this to 12, now only the first 12 rows are duplicates. I change it to 2, only the first 2. And what this will allow us to do is add a second series to our scatter plot using these combinations of points to overlay our grid with filled boxes to indicate the percentage in cell B2. So let's give this thing a shot. I'm going to insert a scatter plot and drag it right here under my percentage. I'll select data, add a series, we'll name the first series empty, and the X values we can just select G3, Control Shift arrow down to G102, and then the Y values H3, Control Shift arrow down to H102. Hit OK, OK. Now we'll do a little bit of formatting here. No title, no grid lines. Don't actually even need the axes themselves. And if we format the plot area, I don't want any fill or any border. And last but not least, I'll edit the series itself. And in my fill and line options, I'm going to go into my marker options here. Use built-in markers with squares, and let's make them nice and big. How about 15-point squares? And why don't we fill those markers with just a light gray, since this is kind of our template. This reflects our empty boxes. We'll do no border on those. And there you have it. So as I kind of shift spacing around, this becomes a really clean 10 by 10 grid. Oops, let's get rid of that border. Format chart area. No border. There we go. So we've got this clean 10 by 10 grid that's populated with these 2 array functions here. And you may have noticed in the Formulas tab, if you look at your name manager, you may have seen these 4 named arrays, which correspond with the arrays that I just walked through in columns G through J. So I've already built these in for you as named ranges, which means you have the option to either create your source data like I just did, Or if you'd rather, you can go into select data and you can edit the series, and instead of G3 through G102, you could just type array underscore X, and your Y's would be array underscore Y. And that does the exact same thing, just two ways to accomplish the same goal. And now all that's left to do is add a second series, and we're going to call this full, and the X values will be the array produced in cells I3 through I102, or I could type after the exclamation point array XX, and same deal here. I could select this whole range from J3 through J102, or just type array YY and hit enter and press OK. And now you see these two little dots. Because I've only selected a percentage of 2, only 2 of these boxes are going to be filled. So maybe we up it to 25 so it's a little bit more readable. And now we can format that second data series. And this is up to you. You could keep them as points or diamonds or triangles or whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to do built-in markers, the same square-sized markers as my empty boxes, so size 15. Just so that they overlay really nicely on top. I'm going to give them a navy blue fill, and I don't want a border on those. And there you go. So I've got my two overlaid 10 by 10 grids with square markers built out in a way that anytime I change this percentage, the right number of boxes will fill up to reflect that here on the grid. It's a really interesting way to visualize something that is pretty simple but can be visualized in a way that's a lot cooler than most people tend to show it. So that's your quick 101 crash course in using array functions to build out a percentage grid.